Bills Mafia. We know there's only one topic every day, all Bills all the time. And now Matt Bove and Sal Capaccio are going really deep, talking Bills all year long, because it's always game day in Buffalo.
No more guessing, no more projecting, no more trying to figure out who is going to make the Buffalo Bills 53-man roster. Because now we know. We are recording this on the night of roster cutdown day, and the Bills have 53 players on their roster. Surely that can change a little bit over the course of the next week and a half, but the majority of what we know now is going to be the guys they roll into the regular season with. Welcome to another episode of It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. I am Matt Bove, Sal Capaccio. Sal, roster cutdown day. There's a lot of different things we can lead off with. We can lead off with Andreessen. We can lead off with surprise cuts. We can lead off with a trade. So I guess dealer's choice. You can pick.
Well, I'm going to go with Joe Andreessen because I just think this is such a great story, and it's really captivating. It's captivated all of Western New York and really a lot of the NFL. Joe Andreessen, the local product, Lancaster High School. And, you know, for me, it's also personal and special. As you know, Matt, I mean, I'm really dialed into the high school football scene here in Buffalo. And, you know, the grassroots game is just so important to me. And I love it. I love that part of the game. And I've gotten to know, you know, Eric Rupp, his high school coach, who's currently the head coach at Lancaster over the last several years. And of course, former Lancaster legendary head coach and now Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame member, Len Jankowicz. I called Joe Andreessen's game at the stadium when he was in high school. I mean, I just think this is such a cool story to see him now make the team. And look, it's not just local kid made the team because the team gave him a shot. This is a legit football player who worked his butt off to get where he is, to get that opportunity, and for it to come to fruition the way it did here when really no one gave him a shot other than, oh, that's pretty cool. I just think it's super awesome.
Yeah, and I think that the point you made is very important because, you know, we put pretty remarkable story and there's all these people who are super excited, but then you get your random people who chime in of like, I don't want my football team to have dudes from Lancaster. I want them to have dudes who know how to play football.
Right.
This is both. Like, he earned a job. He did not get they don't just hand them out of like, hey, man, you're from here, so like take the roster spot. He beat out dudes from much bigger teams, much bigger programs with much more experience because he showed in the preseason that he can play football. He can ball. And I think that there's a ton of potential there. And I know that we probably didn't give him enough of a shot, and then he impressed in the preseason. So good for him. I think it's a super cool story. And I also think the other added layer to it that's super cool is not only did he go to Lancaster, but then he goes to Bryant. Then he ends up at UB. The Buffalo Bills have 3 players on their 53-man roster from the University of Buffalo. There's another team that has 3. There might be 2, but no team has more than that. It's UB, Penn State, and Florida that have the biggest representation. UB is in that group.
How many from Penn State and Florida?
3.
I think, okay, that's right.
It would have been 4 for Penn State. It would have been Daquan Hardy. We'll talk about him later.
Right.
And then Austin Johnson, Connor McGovern, and Daquan Jones. But Daquan Hardy doesn't make it, so it's Connor McGovern, Austin Johnson, and Daquan Jones. And then Florida, I forgot who they are, but I saw somebody post about it on social media.
I thought Georgia might have been in there. I thought Georgia might have been in there, but I think Georgia has only 2 that I can think of: Van Pran Granger and James Cook. But I could be wrong. It could be another guy.
Torrance and
from Florida,
Kyer Elam. Obviously.
There you go. Yep.
I feel like there's one more.
Yeah.
But still,
I mean, look, it's a great story. It's a great point you make. But here's the other part of the story. On the field, where does he fit in? Right. I mean, because I was really interested in what they would do with Balen Spector, given the injury. Balen Spector did not go on injured reserve. He is on the roster. The Bills are carrying 6 linebackers: Terrell Bernard, Dorian Williams, Balen Spector, Nicholas Morrow, Eddie Ulofosio, and Joe Andreessen. So to your point earlier of, hey, we don't know what's going to happen over the next 24 hours from recording this. If they pick somebody up, that's an area where you could understand if they say, you know what, we have one too many guys. That being said, though, with the changes with special teams, you know, you might need more linebackers. And of course, what happened last year with the injuries of this team and the concern about availability for Balen Spector. So now my question is, where does Joe fit in here? Is he the primary backup Mike? That seems to be Balen Spector's spot, but I guess you never know. How much flexibility does he have? He told us he did train a little bit at will linebacker, but it's been mostly Mike. Now the story for me advances to, where does he fit in on this roster as they go forward?
special teams role. I mean, maybe even inactive on game days if he sticks
Yeah,
around
sure.
the 53-man roster. But like, hey, that's totally fine for somebody who is continuing to grow. I mean, he just got here on a tryout as an undrafted rookie. So I think that Balin Spector's availability plays a big role in this. I think Balin Spector is still ahead of him if he is available, but that is a big if with him. So that's why I feel like right now, probably just a special teams contributor if he's even active.
Sure.
But other than that, I think it would take a lot for him to get on the fields and play in an actual like regular role. I don't see that happening anytime soon, but that doesn't take away from what he just accomplished. I mean, they've invested significant resources in Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams. They just drafted Ulofoshio. Balin Spector's been around for a couple of years. They drafted him, obviously. Nicholas Morrow had a ton of tackles in the league last year. So, like, yeah, he might not be on the field a ton, but, you know, I think that this is keep him around because you don't want to let him go and hope that you can continue developing him into a player who can really make a difference.
All right, I'll let you choose next. What's the next storyline for you? We just did Andreessen.
Surprise cuts. There were some moves they made that I was very surprised. I feel like is reserved for people who have probably a more impressive resume, but pretty surprised by the Tyrell Shavers cut and really surprised by the Daquan Hardy one. I did not see that coming at all. I had Daquan Hardy. If the 53-man roster was written in Sharpie, I had him in Sharpie.
Yeah, I had him on the team too. Now, there's a second storyline that goes along with Daquan Hardy, and that is Brandon Codrington. The Bills traded for another return man who also, by the way, made the Jets on a rookie tryout basis. Okay, he was undrafted, not an undrafted free agent contract, goes to the Jets on a tryout basis, makes the team, and he was dynamic in the preseason kick and punt return, especially kick return. Now, we heard rumblings and people said, I guess apparently Daquan Hardy had some sort of injury that was looked at after Saturday's game. He went into the x-ray room. But Matt, if he's injured, you can't cut him. That's the rule. So it must not be an injury. He had to have simply cut by the team, and they're taking a chance that they can get him back in the practice squad, which I think that they would like to do here. But you can't have an injury. If you're going to miss any time, you can't outright cut a player. So this is strictly, to me, a football move where they said, we saw it, we just don't think he's ready. And I get the trepidation. I mean, Sean McDermott's talked about decision-making, although, he didn't have any punt returns on the last preseason game. He made a good decision by letting the ball go. I just think it comes down to them trusting what they have back there, and they liked, for whatever reason, they liked Codrington to bring him in and said, we're just not ready for Daquan Hardy yet.
My question, though, is, and that's a totally fair point, why would they trust somebody who hasn't even been in their organization, who's also an undrafted rookie who has flashed in the preseason? I mean, you just look up his name and you can see the highlights and whatnot, but are they basing it off of just that? Like, was Daquan Hardy that much different than what they were trading for? I mean, I know it wasn't a massive asset. They give up a 6th, they get him and a 7th back. It's just weird to me. Like, it doesn't make a ton of sense unless they really think that Codrington has all of this untapped potential. But I guess my question is, like, how would they even know? Right? Like,
well, my sense is, my guess is, and we're going to hear from Brandon Bean, by the way, on Wednesday.
Yeah.
He'll probably tell us that it's a guy they followed. It's a guy that they liked coming out of college. It's a guy that maybe they just didn't offer. And, but it's a guy that they understood and they watched a lot of him. And I get it. It's a great question. It's a fair question. I think even more fair is, especially when you saw Daquan Hardy actually play defense and play the boundary, and he actually didn't do too bad, right? Now, this is a guy that's not going to do that for you. He's going to come in, and he can maybe eventually. But I bet you the return aspect is more of a, hey, we watched this guy catch a lot of punts and kickoffs, and we know what he can do, so we're going to trust him back there. Now, let's remember, they do have Khalil Shakir in a situation where if they just want to have a punt catcher, right? And God is not going to return as much with the dynamic ability, but catch the ball. But they did also get rid of and cut KJ Hamler. So all of it's really interesting to me, the way it washes out.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when Tyrell Shavers got cut, that happened in the morning. I then for a little bit thought that meant maybe KJ Hamler was going to stick around and that they were going to use him as like the break glass in case of emergency Daquan Hardy wasn't available or was injured. And then neither of them was around. And it was like, okay, well, what's going on here? And then they make the trade. I thought when you asked me on the last episode of the podcast, over under a half trade, I said over. I thought it was going to be like a quarterback thing. I didn't think they were going to go out and get a kick returner. I thought that they had much more pressing needs on their roster that they were going to be scouring, the different teams and have their pro scouts input and all that kind of stuff. That one really surprised me.
We'll get to quarterback in a second. You did bring up Tyrell Shavers. I was also surprised. Look, for anybody who says there's two parts of this, right, Matt? We get it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
How could you guys not see Tyrell Shavers isn't that good? Whatever. It's not about what we think. We're not the evaluators. We're telling you what we think the team thinks based on how they're treating the player. And from everything we saw, correct me if you think I'm wrong, from everything we saw pretty much since the start of camp, Tyrell Shavers was always in that top 6 group at wide receiver. But at the end of the day, they elected to keep 5, and that's what keeps them out.
Yeah, I mean, Deion Dawkins, I remember doing a story on Tyrell Shavers at training camp, and the question to Deion Dawkins was, has there been anybody who has impressed you that we're not talking enough about? And he said, yeah, Tyrell Shavers. And that kind of set up my story very nicely for me, because it was like, okay, yeah, he's impressed with him. Joe Brady's impressed with him. Josh Allen is saying all the right things. The thing that spoke such volumes to me was like he was getting snaps with Josh Allen. They do not waste those snaps or reps for somebody who they do not think is going to be on the team. So the minute that started, I was like, okay, this guy's trending up. The one thing I will say about Tyrell Shavers, it felt like the trending up was happening while we were still in Rochester, and then it started to level off or maybe dip off a little bit once we got into the preseason. So maybe that's why. Maybe he built up some momentum and then it started to slow down. But I still thought that he was going to be the guy if they were going to keep another one, and maybe he would have been, but they just decided they only needed 5 and not 6.
Yeah, so you brought up quarterback and maybe them trading for someone. Quarterback played out exactly the way I thought it would, which is this. Mitch Trubisky's on the roster. He's your backup quarterback. But if he's not ready for week 1, which also could run into week 2 after it's only 5 days, you use your practice squad quarterback as an elevation, your number 3. Well, that being said, you need someone then, to me, that's got to be ready and knows the playbook. I think this is basically earmarked for Ben DiNucci. Now, they could go out and get somebody. That's fine.
Well,
but if you're... Go ahead.
A little bit of breaking news.
Oh, boy. Here we go. Podcast. Maybe I'm wrong.
Tom Pelissero, veteran quarterback Mike White, is visiting with the Bills.
All right. Well, maybe it's Mike White. I like Mike White, by the way, as a backup.
This is literally 3 minutes ago. So, okay. I mean, maybe that's their plan.
Ooh. Wait a minute. Hold on. He just came from the Dolphins.
The Bills
play them week. They play them week 2.
The Bills hosted former Jets and Dolphins quarterback Mike White on a free agent visit. That's from Field Yates as of 9 minutes ago of when we're recording this.
Okay. So whether it's Ben DiNucci or Mike White or Desmond Ridder or whoever it is, to me, this is Mitch Trubisky's the number 2, and then you elevate your practice squad quarterback, and then eventually, if you think that he beats out Mr. Trubisky, you make that switch. But otherwise, this is basically how they're going to play it. By the way, I think that's really interesting. I do like Mike White. I've admired Mike White, for a couple of years, although it didn't go as well. We all know Matt Milano, basically, like that hit he had a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I was thinking about Desmond Ridder today. The Cardinals released him. I'm like, wait a minute, week 1, a little intel. You want to bring him in, and now you get the guy who the next week 2, the Miami Dolphins bring him in for a little bit of intel.
What is this is just anything could happen here. You think that Mike White would be sign him to your practice squad and then elevate him for week 1, right? You do not think that this would be like sign him to your active roster type deal?
I don't. But, that may be a situation where he says, like, I'm not going on a practice squad somewhere. I'm going on someone's roster, and maybe you don't get a deal done. But to do that, you would release Trubisky. You could carry 3. You could release somebody else from a different position. There's no doubt about it.
That's the whole Joe Andreessen conversation of, the initial stuff. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying if you are one of the guys who just made the team, which we're anticipating, he is one of those guys who just made the team. That's why it's not just getting through the 4:00 deadline today. It's getting through the next few days and seeing how things ultimately play itself out. So, yeah, it's just the Mike White one of the quarterbacks who are potentially available, a lot of experience. I'm not saying you want to start Mike White, but you feel better about Mike White than you do about Ben DiNucci or Anthony Brown or Shane Buechele or something like that.
All right, so I know we have a producer. His name is Mike Rabier. Mike, forgive me. I'm going to interject here and put this on the screen. There you go. That's I could have done it better. There you go. I added my roster that people see me do on X right there, and I put it on the old overlay there. So there you go.
If we put our heads all the way to the side, you can get the heads on the other way.
That's why I should have had you do it, Mike.
Other way. There you go. Exactly.
So there we go. Anyway, take a look at it. In orange, two guys, Matt Milano and Darrington Evans, that are designated to return. That was something that was a little confusing because when the Bills initially put out their list of players who made the squad, or cuts, I should say, and then IR, they did not have Milano listed as a designated to return, which would mean, oh my God, he's out for the year.
Woof.
But
Yeah.
confirmed by the team. It was tweeted out by Ian Rapport. I confirmed with the team as well. Matt Milano is designated to return. So is Darrington Evans. So they go there. The guys that cannot come back, Terrell Burgess, D. Delaney, Travis Clayton, Tommy Doyle, and Shane Buechele, who've been on IR for a little while here. All right, taking a look at that entire list. What else stands out to you about any moves the Bills made or didn't make today?
Well, one of the names not on that list, La'el Collins. That was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that he was going to be on the team, but clearly they went with their young guys and they like the upside there. I thought I spent too much of my time that I would care to admit trying to decipher his Instagram post this morning where he said, like, Buffalo, thank you, hashtag the marathon continues. I immediately was like, okay, he got cut for sure. But then I was listening to you on my way to work when somebody told you this, and then you guys were like, could that mean he's staying? And he's like, thank you for the opportunity. Let's get ready for the season. The marathon continues. So, you know, I spent way too much time trying to figure it out, to the point that, like, we had to have graphics ready for TV, and we had to have two graphics. And I had a graphic from, shout out Julia Skevel, one of our producers, super talented. She made a graphic that had all of the roster cuts with La'el Collins' name on it, and then all of the roster cuts without La'el Collins' name on it, because I just didn't know. And I was like, this is the one guy I can't figure out.
I'm going to give you some advice, Matthew Bove. I know it's a lot tougher for you in TV because, you know, you have to show graphics, and I'm radio and I can talk.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you some advice. Don't read into players' social media stories and posts. You'll go crazy. I have learned people say, oh my God, did you see this guy posted this and he's mad about the team? Could be mad. He might be having a argument with somebody in his family for all I know. Stop. Just stop. This is the way people communicate these days.
The Stephon Diggs "you sure" tweet got me in that 9 minutes.
It could mean something, but you never know.
Don't read too much into this. Bam! Stephon Diggs traded to the Houston Texans. Okay. So yeah, I gotta be careful with those social media posts.
All right, let's take a look at this roster a little bit more here. Jamarcus Ingram, of course, we talked about it. You know, makes the team. Good for him, no doubt there. Let's go to the defensive end and defensive tackle group. You see that in the left side of your screen right there. I think a big surprise for a lot of fans was A, Kingsley Jonathan not making the team, and B, Casey Toohill making the team. So, look, if anybody asks, I mean, I've been asked today a lot. Why would Casey Toohill make the team? He didn't show anything. I guess my answer would be, and I don't know this, but my sense is, being around the team enough, they signed the guy for a reason, but he's been unavailable in training camp and preseason, but they believe that reason they signed him is still worthy. And they believe he's going to be a player that's going to help them on their defense. Kingsley Jonathan is a player they really like. He's been here. He actually was claimed 2 years ago when he was released by the Bears, wound up coming back to Buffalo after getting waived by them. It's a guy that you could probably get back in your practice squad, but hey, free agency, money, what they thought about Casey Toohill, I think plays a big role in here, and just kind of the faith, I guess, the faith in why they signed him in the first place.
Yeah, but I
don't love it, but
I get it. It's the one that was the biggest surprise to me, probably, that was actually on the roster. I didn't think that there were many people, you know, you look at the 53-man roster that you put together and that our peers put together, and then you just kind of think about what you've seen this summer. And I thought a lot about today, him getting after the quarterback against the Panthers and making a good play and then not being able to bring the quarterback down to the ground. And I'm like, ooh, like that's a play Casey Toohill needs to make if he wants to make the roster. And he doesn't, but he made it anyway. So, I mean, clearly they just, I guess, are valuing known production, I guess, would probably be the thing to say, right? As a backup, right? They just, with questions to all those other guys, they just want somebody who they think is maybe a little bit more of a sure bet.
We are talking here. It's 8:51 in the evening at night, as you said. You know, the tweet came out from Pelissero, and I'm reading the Giants apparently just made all their cuts official. On their list is Isaiah McKenzie on IR. He will not be, and not designated to return either. Isaiah McKenzie, just so people are aware, former Bill there, Isaiah McKenzie going on season-ending IR. The Giants did make another move, though, earlier that caught attention of a lot of people. They released Isaiah Hodgins. Is that something you're interested in for the Buffalo Bills?
No. Quite simply, this is cruel. This is a little too harsh. This is not a blanket statement I'm saying. But if he's not good enough to make the Giants, why would he be an addition that the Bills need to make?
It's a good question.
I mean,
listen, I mean, I'm sure the answer from Brian Dable and Joe Shane would be, look, he doesn't really help us in special teams. And if you're a back-end wide receiver, you got to be able to play some special teams. Not that Marquez Valdez-Scantling is necessarily, but the Bills are only keeping 5. So I think that all those guys are going to play a little bit. I think it's a good point you raise. I like some aspects of his game. But you know what I think about, Matt? Here's my broad view of Isaiah Hodgins being released and Kadarius Toney being released, which is, how many times did you and I and other media members and other people sit and have to read how much of a genius these other coaches and organizations must be to have Isaiah Hodgins and Kadarius Toney, and why can't the Bills, and they're so dumb, and Bean this and McDermott that? I mean, obviously that's not the case, right? Isaiah Hodgins did perform well for the Giants. Doesn't mean he would never have had that role on the Bills. Yeah. He would have been buried behind several receivers on the Buffalo Bills. Kadarius Toney, what was everyone so worried about him with the Kansas City Chiefs? Did he have a couple nice plays? Of course, he made a big punt return in the Super Bowl. It wasn't like Andy Reid unlocked some secret formula with Kadarius Toney. Both the Giants and the Chiefs saw Kadarius Toney isn't available enough, and he's not there good enough, available enough, whatever, to play in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think of like what you just said. I think of the Xavier Worthy stuff. It's like, you let the Chiefs get Xavier Worthy. He hasn't even played yet. We don't know. We don't know. Nobody knows. Sure. Yes. It's like, you let Sky Moore fall to the Kansas City Chiefs. And then it's just, I don't know. They get the benefit of the doubt. Of course, they deserve it. They've got the best quarterback in the league.
Yes.
And a brilliant offensive mind. And more often than not, guys like that are going to work out. But they don't always. Right. And all of this is just a calculated risk and a guess, I would say, most of the time. So, yeah, when you see that stuff happen and then you see it not work out, you're like, oh, wow, what a shock. Sometimes it doesn't work out exactly as these teams have hoped. It's not just the Bills who sometimes swing and miss.
Okay. Another player we need to talk about a little bit is Frank Gore Jr. By this time tomorrow, is Frank Gore Jr. on another team's 53?
Breaking news.
Frank Gore Jr.
Staying in the AFC East. Former Dolphins and Jets quarterback Mike White is signing with the Buffalo Bills practice squad.
There you go. And he can do that
because will be White's third different AFC East team in 3 seasons.
Okay. There you go.
That's from ESPN's. That's from ESPN's Adam Schefter. Adam Schefter.
Okay. So, again, this basically to me is Mike White becomes your third QB week 1, and then you elevate him. And Trubisky, if Trubisky can't play, you elevate him. He becomes your backup quarterback week 1, and maybe week 2 against the Miami Dolphins.
Yes, absolutely. Keep talking for a second. I'm just posting this on social media.
Yeah, you got it. I'm gonna do the same thing here, but I want to talk about Frank Gore. We're gonna talk about Mike White. You're gonna do that, and then I'm gonna post something on social media while you do it. I'll talk about Frank Gore, then you give your thoughts. We're doing this in real time. This is really cool radio podcasting. I guess. I hope you all think that. Listen, Frank Gore Jr. I think there was a chance a team scoops him up. I mean, heck, last year, 2 years ago, Raheem Blackshear got scooped up by the Carolina Panthers. We know teams are, they'd be willing to do that. I think the question here is another team think that Frank Gore Jr. is better than what they have currently on their 53. And the Bills are banking on that not being the case. But if it is, hey, good for Frank Gore Jr. There was just not a spot for Frank Gore Jr. on the Buffalo Bills at this time. I love his vision. I love what he did last week. I love the fact that his name is Frank Gore and who his dad is. He's a great kid. There's no doubt about that, right? I love all of that about Frank Gore. But the fact is, James Cook and Ray Davis, we know, are the top 2. And this came down to Frank Gore versus Ty Johnson. And if you want to make the case that Frank Gore has more upside and he'll be a better future back, I am totally with you. But he wasn't asked to pass block much during preseason. Ty Johnson can pass block. Ty Johnson can return kicks. Ty Johnson just does more for this roster right now than Frank Gore, where if you can get him on your practice squad, then you develop him.
Are we forgetting how great Ty Johnson, great is probably a little bit too strong, but how good Ty Johnson was for the Bills last year? They used him in a lot of different situations. So to me, this is not knock on Frank Gore Jr. It's that Ty Johnson's a really good third running back. They very clearly value Ray Davis to the point that I think he is their bona fide backup. I like Frank Gore a lot. Frank Gore Jr. a lot, I should say. I got to clarify. I think that he is the perfect candidate for a practice squad job. I think he is somebody you can continue to develop, and then next year he can be your third running back, and then maybe he gets on the field a little bit more, and you can kind of grow it that way. I really like Sal's point, what he said on the last podcast about teams are going to want their own guys to be the ones that they have on their roster or on their practice squad. So I do fully anticipate that he is going to be somebody the Bills are going to get to keep around on their practice squad and just continue to develop. So I like this for the Bills. I know that a lot of fans wanted to see him make the team. I just never really thought it was super realistic. And I think that he could be a nice player, but it's probably at least a year or two away, and that's totally fine. I mean, keep in mind, once again, everybody, this was an undrafted rookie, right? Like, he had a strong preseason, but all of these teams also passed on him in the draft. So it's not like after just a couple preseason games, these teams are going to be kicking down the doors to try and sign him to their active roster. I just don't see that happening. I won't be shocked if it happens. I just don't foresee it going down that way. Good job tweeting that pretty quickly, or posting on X. I'm sure that's what you were doing.
Yeah, right there. I just did. Basically, here's what I wrote, okay? And I just said this on the podcast. I just posted this on X. My guess is if Trubisky isn't totally healthy for week 1, White gets elevated for that game as the backup QB, and then maybe again against his former team, the Dolphins, in week 2, just 5 days later. That's the way I see this playing out. And you could do a lot worse, I think, than Mike White for your backup emergency / QB,
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I mean, I think so too. I don't think that it's like, oh my God, this guy's incredible, but I think he is a very, very above replacement level option as a third quarterback and potentially your second quarterback for a couple weeks. The Bills are screwed if Josh Allen gets hurt, but this is at least somebody who you would at least have a chance, I think, with for a couple games.
No doubt. All right, what are we leaving on the bone here? Any meat on the bone for roster cuts? We talked about Frank Gore. Okay, so Zach Davidson doesn't make it.
Yeah, we should talk Zach Davidson.
It wasn't a surprise to me. I've been saying it for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Zach Davidson, he looks really good. He just doesn't do enough around the roster. You know what Zach Davidson is? He's a backup pass-catching tight end if someone gets hurt. Then you elevate him if he's on the practice squad, but that's who he is.
Yeah, I think so. I think another solid player that could, in a pinch, be elevated from the practice squad if absolutely needed, but I think that just Quentin Morris does way too much for you on special teams to not have him as your third tight end. I heard the argument. I didn't necessarily agree with it, that if you want to use a lot of 12 personnel, maybe you keep an extra tight end and you've got a fourth guy.
Sure.
But I also think that, if you're not going to have him active on game days, which I didn't think they would, what's the difference than having him on the practice squad and then calling him up? Or if there's an injury, just elevating him to the 53-man roster. Same thing I said about Frank Gore Jr. I don't think there's going to be teams that are trying to sign Zach Davidson to their 53-man roster. So I think he'll be somebody who they can keep around, continue to develop. Develop feels like a little weird to say for somebody who's been around for a little bit longer than Frank Gore Jr. has, but keep on the practice squad and maybe get elevated at some point. I mean, think about it. The Bills elevated players and had them play from their practice squad a lot last year. There were a lot of different instances where that happened. They've done it with Jamarcus Ingram over the years. They did it with Andy Isabella a bunch. It's not super uncommon. So just because these guys are going to be on the practice squad doesn't mean that we won't see them at any point. We might.
Let's get to the secondary real quick because I want to touch on safety. I think what today's moves also signified, Matt, is that they're confident that Mike Edwards and Cole Bishop are going to be ready to play because it's Rapp, it's Edwards, it's Bishop, it's Cam Lewis, who's the backup nickel, but also can play safety. He's a guy that has, a lot of traits. And then, of course, a lot of versatility, I should say. And then Damar Hamlin, but also corner. Right now, they're outside corners. You have 4 of them: Douglas and Benford, Elam, and Ingram. Are you comfortable with that group?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I am. I think that the corner room has become a sneaky strength for the Bills. And I know we talked a little bit about the idea of potentially turning Kaiir Elam into a different player or trading him while he's got a little bit more value. But I think that injuries happen all the time at corner. And I think that you want to have solid depth there. And I like Jamarcus Ingram a lot. And I think Kaiir Elam is continuing to trend in the right direction. So I really like their top 2 guys. And then I like the 2 guys that they have below Douglas and Benford. I think they've got a nice kind of group of 4 guys that can play on the boundary there.
The Bills do have, I'm looking at their roster, by the way, going back to the college thing. Yeah, 3 from Buffalo, 2 from Kentucky. Ray Davis.
And okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I should have given you a chance to guess that. 2 from North Carolina.
Mitch Trubisky and is it obvious?
You'll say, "Oh, I should have known that." We did stories on the
Matt
fact.
Collins. Matt
Yes,
Collins.
very good. 3 from Penn State.
I
3
got
from
that.
Penn State.
Austin Johnson, Daquan Hardy, or Austin
Daquan.
Johnson, Daquan Jones, Connor McGovern.
That's right. And as you said earlier, they would have had 4 if they would have kept. 2 from Utah. That's easy.
Yeah. Cole Bishop and Dalton Kincaid.
2 from Washington. One was a draft pick this year.
Eddie Ulofoshio.
Yep. And I don't know if you know this guy's from Washington. I don't think of him like that. Not that I think of anything, but I'll tell you, it's Taylor Rapp.
Would have never got that.
Yeah, right?
No, I don't think I would have ever got that.
There you go. And of course, 3 from Buffalo, which is insane.
What was there a third from Florida? Is it Osiris Torrance, Kyer Elam, and somebody else?
From Florida, EFG. I gotta go scroll down. Here we go. No, just 2. Unless was there somebody who got released? Maybe we'd have to check on that. Justin Shorter was released.
Sure, yeah, he could have played for Florida or Penn State. He could have been either.
Where did he start?
Penn State,
and then he went to Florida, so he counts as Florida.
Yeah,
It's a good point. I hate it. It's one of those things. It's one of those like things, pet peeves about sports. Like you spend like Joe Andreessen. It's great that he counts for UB. He spent 5 years at Bryant University.
Mm-hmm.
Like they should get credit for having an NFL player.
Yeah.
But they don't.
No. You know what I always kind of think about with this, and it's not like I think about it a ton, but if you're somebody who goes to college and then you spend a bunch of money for your undergrad and then you go to grad school, then you're never going to say where you went to undergrad ever again. People are like, "Oh, where'd you go to school?" And you're probably going to be like, "Oh yeah, if you're applying for a job, I got my master's at UB or something." And then it's like, well, yeah, but you spent 4 years and you spent $150,000 or something on a school you never went to. So yeah, I don't know.
This isn't just a transfer portal thing, by the way. Cam Newton started his career at Florida, but no one thinks about him at Florida.
No,
he's Auburn.
No, I mean Caleb Williams started his career at Oklahoma, but everybody just thinks about him at USC.
That's exactly right. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. All right. Anything else that you want to get to before we wrap this episode up? And we'll let everybody know that, of course, if you're listening, we really appreciate that. That's on any Odyssey platform. And of course, wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, at the Sal Sports YouTube channel. By the way, follow and subscribe on the YouTube channel. You know what I'm going to do, Matt? This week, be on the lookout, everybody. Every year I do an NFL Survivor contest and an NFL Pick'em contest. And it's free to enter. All I ask, and you win a prize at the end, and we'll reveal that prize. And all I ask is for people to follow along on social, and that would help us grow the brand here.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm just sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained right now because I'm trying to figure out how I'm handling this Mike White stuff. Because as you can tell, I'm gonna. We just switched. There you go.
Sorry, I did that. Sorry, Mike. I clicked the button.
I'm in a t-shirt in my basement, so now I'm trying to figure out if I need to like snap into work mode or if somebody else can handle it. Always on the clock.
Okay, you asked me a map and driving question a few weeks ago. I'm going to ask you one now. Okay?
Yes.
We're going to end this, okay?
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out and a thank you. Amazing. I am always honored to be the MC at the Coaches versus Cancer dinner and golf event down at Bartlett Country Club in Olean. It was a great event this year, and I'm a big college basketball fan, and I got to spend a weekend and a couple nights with some of the best minds in the business and college basketball coaches. So thank you very much. Coaches versus Cancer, amazing event. I actually drove Seth Greenberg, ESPN lead college basketball analyst and former USF and Virginia Tech head coach. I drove him from Olean all the way back to his hotel at the Buffalo airport. We spent an hour and a half in the car together. It was amazing. I loved that. And then I looked at the directions. I'm like, okay, I've driven from Olean to Buffalo many times. There are a lot of really dark back roads. And I'm like, I think, if I'm driving Seth Greenberg, I'd probably want to take more of the highway road. So I took a different route. Have you ever done this drive? Have you gone from Olean to Buffalo? Not Buffalo to Olean. Always seems like it's different coming back.
Yeah. I actually I don't know if this is like a deep cut or not, but I went to a place called Sprague's, the restaurant that everybody loves, like that goes to St. Bonaventure and Olean. And we made the drive, and I don't remember how it was different. I think we took the same way going there and coming back. I had a couple buddies who went to Bonaventure, but that was a long time ago. So I don't exactly know like the easiest way that you would take. I mean, don't you just take it Don't you take the
Well,
219 and
you
then you get
do.
off and then right?
You do, but you have to get to the 219. That's the issue. And then there's all these like really back roads. So what I did was instead of taking those roads, I mean, I think I actually wound up doing that at the end. I took like Maine. We went through Holland. You know, you go through that road, you go through Holland. There was a Farmersville was the name of a town, but there's other ways to go too. And I'm just curious, like how most people do it, because there's some really winding, dark back roads that you drive through with no cell service whatsoever. Like it literally is SOS on your phone, and you're like, should I be driving here right now? It's a nice drive, but it's also a scary drive.
Yeah, well, good job on returning the package safely to his hotel because we need our March Madness coverage and we need it now. So good job.
Yeah, for sure. So great job. Thank you very much. Seth Greenberg obviously was a part of that. Mark Schmidt down at Ole and St. Bonaventure University. Got to meet a lot of fantastic people as well. Matt and I will be back with another episode of It's Always Game Day in Buffalo. We want to thank Mike Robier, our producer, for doing a great job. Hey, we got a special treat coming up also soon for you. Matt, we're going to talk with Mark Schlereth.
Yes.
He is NFL football analyst, TV show, former player, Washington, Denver. That's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I mean, obviously, I've talked to him before. Just a really cool guy, good football mind. And, we always just like talking about football. So it'll be good.
All right. We'll talk next time on It's Always Game Day in Buffalo.